They had a choice of Jesus, the one that has healed and done nothing but bless, Jesus Barabbas, that have done nothing but torment and hurt and kill. And the crowd picked Barabbas. They said, what do you do about this Jesus? I mean, what else can you do with a man like Jesus? What do you do with a man that lives his life in pure transparency, like an open book? Doesn't have to be in a man's house to say, be healed, and he's healed. No guns, no ammunition, and yet still gets revolutionary responses today. What do you do with a man that's omnipresent? That means he could be everywhere at once, clothed in human form. Omnipotent means all-powerful. Omniscient, all-knowing. Confined to a baby's crib? What do you do with this kind of man? The crowd that day said, you crucify him. You crucify him. They took him out, maybe a mile's walk, down to a place called Golgotha, a place of the skull. And if you notice, there were four, the garrison that was to execute him was there. They stripped him of every bit of clothing he had. And for his undergarments, they took it and decided to gamble for it. Do you realize that in that moment, 66 prophecies in this book was fulfilled? That to only fulfill 4 of them would have been, the chances would have been 1 to 10 to the 57th power. That means 57 zeros after it. To fulfill all 66 would be 1 in 10 to the 187th power. 180 zeros all the way down. That one man would fulfill all 66. There's no doubt it was our Jesus that fulfilled it. He took his hands and they placed it down on the cross. But it was different than the thieves on either side of him. The thieves on either side struggled and cursed and yelled and screamed. The back that was already ripped apart, they carried across down that mile, that barely was able to carry it. Another man had to carry it all the way. Laid on that cross, they threw him to the ground. The dirt in his back caused more pain. His muscles were twitching because of the scourging. The fibers, every part of him felt excruciating pain. And yet he places his hand on the cross. And an area that the Romans knew very well, right here on the palm of his hand, if you took your finger and put it through, perfectly between the bones so that prophecy would be filled, that not a bone would be crushed, a spike was put through. And was put through to cause the greatest amount of pain with that radial nerve. For it would crush the nerve and bring his hands together. He lays it down. Can you imagine what that was like? The hammer comes down, a spark flies. Jesus does not motion it. He gave up that life. The soldier holding that hammer, looking down at the face of Jesus. And in the face, he doesn't see like the other criminals, the anger and the resentment and the vile. He looked in the face, and as he saw before, even during the scourge, he saw a prince in disguise. He saw one that looked at him and forgave him immediately of what he was doing. He saw one that had so much compassion towards him. He showed a look that even his own father never showed him. Can you imagine the shaking of his hands trying to put that hammer down through that hand, through the nail, and trying to understand and comprehend the love of the man that he is trying to kill? The hands were placed, one foot on top of the other. The cross was brought up. And on that hill called Golgotha, known as the place of the skull, like a sword being driven into the head of the snake, that cross went down. Desire of Ages said it was that moment that Jesus felt the most excruciating pain. For in that moment, the very first prophecy in Scripture was fulfilled. For he will bruise his heels, but this one seed will bruise his head. He stood on the cross, breathing up and down, one breath at a time, breathing. And I wonder who was at the front of the cross. It was soldiers, yes. It was his mother. It was one disciple, John. Other ladies that were a part of where he was. And it was interesting because I look at the soldiers as they're watching this, and I look at Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was a Jewish woman. Did you notice she never said one word? She never said a word. I mean, if they killed him because they said he was a Jew, she could have at least said, well, he's lying. Or she could have said he's crazy. You don't have to kill him for it. But you never see Mary speaking one word. As a matter of fact, if you go through scriptures, have you meditated on what the last words of Mary recorded in the scripture was? Do you know what those last words were? It was found during the time in John chapter 2 when Mary was there at a feast, at a wedding ceremony. And they ran out of wine. And you know what her last words recorded in Scripture was? Whatever he says, do it. That's all she needed to say. She didn't need to say anything else. Because everything they said about him was true. He was the Son of God. He was God. He was the King. They put him to death for who he was. They were scared of what he could do. And just as creation, he looked and he said it was finished. And everything was good. It's very good. On that cross, you see him doing the same thing. Can you imagine what it was like on there? Flies and mosquitoes having a free meal on the cross. He couldn't even bat them away. He looked down as a violent crowd was speaking to him, but he saw much more there. The Bible talks about that there was a darkness that came around the cross. Ellen White, if you read her writings, it gives a graphic view of what happened. A darkness came upon the whole land. And in that moment, he screams out, "It is finished," in a loud voice. And creation shook. They said that a light came from his face because in that small moment, his face shone as bright as the sun. In that little moment, what they thought was lightning was a glimpse of his divinity. Just for a moment. And though demons might have been praising, those words, those 3 words, "it is finished," was something else. You see, it didn't mean that he had lost. You see, in the Hebrew, those words were only given to a commander. From one that has finished his task. It is finished, sir. It's done. It's complete. You see, before the words came an event where he said, "I thirst." You see, the cup that he had taken, he had drank all of it. And he was asking God, is there any more? Are there any others down through time and eternity that I could be able to drink that cup as well? Is it one more drop of sin that I could take on? Is there someone down throughout eternity that I could look at that would maybe bow their knee and say, "Lord, forgive me"? Is there one more? Just one. And silence came back from heaven. And it's like he took that cup and just laid it down. It's But see, those 3 words does not end there. I believe he's going to say those 3 words one more time. You see, Scriptures gives us a promise. He came to life. But before, he told his people, those who were there, he said, in my Father's house there are many mansions. If it wasn't so, I would not tell you. But I go and prepare a place for you, for where I am, I want you to be also. You see, Jesus, when he died and he rose from the grave,